because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are, and we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is a show in which we discuss philosophical themes in popular films. My name is Justin.
I'm Laura.
And today we're holed up in an Iraqi family's house on an Overwatch mission with a bunch of Navy SEALs. That means we're discussing Alex Garland's 2025 film, Warfare.
Oh, he's back. That's the fourth fucking time he's done that.
Is he peeking or probing?
Peeking with serious intent to probe.
Alpha 2, we might have guys starting to move on our position.
Copy, we're getting a buildup of activity here too.
Yeah, I definitely see weapons at this point.
Yeah, we have definite massing.
Redman 08 is profane. We're seeing activity converging to your north and south.
This is Frogman 6 Romeo. We need evac at our last known position.
We have severely wounded.
Who's the severely wounded?
It's not you.
Is it me? Who is it?
No, it's not you.
No, who is it?
Copy, 1, we're in contact 2.
You coming to you or you coming to us?
Stand by. We'll let you know when we're inbound.
Let's move!
And welcoming to the show for the first time, we have Jim Penola. Jim is the creator and host of An Invitation Productions, a narrative critical hybrid podcast about Karen Kusama's The Invitation and Destroyer. Welcome to Cows in the Field, Jim.
Thank you for having me, Justin and Laura. I'm so honored.
Jim, we are honored to have you. We really enjoy your show. We were honored to be on it. And
I'm so great.
I was very excited when you suggested Warfare. A film that it had sort of fallen off my radar. It came out. I said, oh, I'll have to see that eventually, and then kind of forgot about it. I think it just kind of fell out of the spotlight. I think it just kind of, was in and out of theaters quickly. How are you feeling generally about the film Warfare, and then also just about Alex Garland generally? I feel like he's a bit of a polarizing filmmaker. So what are your thoughts?
Thank you for even just getting that word out of the way, because that's one of the many that I think has been swimming through my head in anticipating this conversation, is polarizing. I happen to be one of the people who really admires Garland's work, his body of work. I find him to be a really fascinating, I think, just like film thinker. I really like listening to him discuss the way he thinks about movies and storytelling. And so for that reason, this movie was, I remember when it first was announced, it seemed like it was like sort of like a stealth production, in the sense that Civil War was this quasi-surprise hit. It made a lot of money. It was A24's most expensive movie. And then almost on the momentum of that, the way I remember it is that A24 were just like, here's Warfare, and it's the guy who did Civil War, but now he's co-directing and co-writing with an Iraq War veteran. So it was, it's funny you mentioned the fact that this movie sort of came and went, because I feel like maybe part of the reason for that is just maybe that the fact that general audiences compress the two movies. They literally share a word. They're inextricable from each other. They're so closely tied to each other. In a lot of ways, you can't talk about one without talking about the other, because of Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza's relationship, his co-writer, co-director, Iraq War vet. So this movie, another way I keep thinking about it is like, we were just discussing off mic for a second, like, oh, did we like it or not? And I think the reason I eventually texted you and was like, it has to be Warfare if I'm to come onto the show. The reason I just kept rubber banding, kept boomeranging back to this movie as my pick is because it is just such a stimulating jumping off board to even talk about the purpose or utility of this medium. As we'll get into, it is a narrative. It decenters any one protagonist, and that's not even to say it's like a shifting perspective thing, like recent hit Weapons, or its inspirations like Magnolia, etc. This is just scattershot by design. So even though I maybe hesitate to say I enjoy this movie, one thing I don't hesitate in saying is that I am endlessly fascinated by this movie, just because it feels like there are so many inherent contradictions, some of which are sort of pet obsessions of the filmmakers, and then just the inherent tension of this stoic British guy and an American Iraq war vet coming on set and somehow reconciling their two interests, essentially. And I think that tension is a huge component, or just huge engine behind what makes this movie, I think, largely successful.
Maybe the first place I want to start is with the challenges of making a war film in 2025. So, part of the reason I think we can go ahead and start here is that I think Civil War is very much a product of today. And by that, I mean that we're in an extremely politically polarized time in which people are apt to read politics into everything. They're apt to, for example, drudge up the alleged Francis Truffaut quote that there's no such thing as an anti-war film, and use that as a kind of reaction to films like this, which tell the story of soldiers in armed conflict. I think the center of that kind of critique is the idea that any portrayal in the medium of film of war is inevitably going to be glorifying or something the soldiers, and thus in some ways serve as a kind of recruitment tool for both the American military and also American expansionist foreign policy, etc. And what I think is interesting about Civil War is it seems to be made with these criticisms in mind. Whether or not it overcomes them is another question, but it seems to be very much sort of aware of them. And it also seems very much aware of the history of war films in in Hollywood. And by bringing in as a co-director Ray Mendoza, he's the character of Ray, played by Defero Wunatai. There's this like intense devotion to a kind of verite or realism. And like it seems like that's the filmmaker's guiding light is we will make this thing as realistic as possible. And it does seem like a lot of the positive critique, reactions to the movie were from veterans and from other people who at least were saying, well, at least it
got it right.
It seems to have gotten things right, and portrayed this stuff as whatever as accurate. Now, again, whether or not like fidelity to what happened is a final end goal of war films, it certainly is a metric by which these things have been judged, which is why I think it's sort of in discussion with the history of war films, and that like, one metric by which people would praise a film like Saving Private Ryan is they would say, well, that Normandy scene is so visceral and seemingly realistic. Like we hadn't seen war portrayed that sort of, and
in like an embodied way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Jim, I mean, I think this film is grappling with the very question of the war film, the challenges of making a war film. How do you see it as potentially, succeeding or failing on that front? Qua war film?
Excellent question. Love that. And I feel like that's just sort of re-articulating for me just something I think I started to hopefully touch on, which is just what is the point of this movie, or maybe what are its aims?
Yes, good.
What are its goals? Does it succeed in achieving its own set of rules, right? I believe it was Ebert was famously someone who asked, I'm sort of judging this based on its own internal set of goals, right? So if we're to sort of use that lens assess this movie's success as a conventional war movie, that I hit roadblocks immediately, and this is where just my brain starts to fire up and get intrigued all over again. And I start over. Is like, I don't even know if this film Warfare 2025 could be largely considered a conventional war film. It's certainly conventional in the sense that its depiction of conflict I find very familiar. One of my favorite movies is John Woo's Wind Talkers. Very different, tonally, in virtually every way. So different, very conventional, I would say, because you've got this sort of sweeping symphonic scores and these because John Woo, huge emotions, just choreography that you would probably never, ever see on a real battlefield. So it's sort of like a fantasy world, but I feel like that's kind of, again, the broad language of war movies for the last roughly 100 years. So the overlap I see between, the more expected sort of war films, say Hacksaw Ridge, another example.
Yeah.
There are innumerable examples. Warfare, again, like the choreography, the physical rehearsal, the dance of the hand signals, the Navy SEALs choreography. It's a huge part of how they breach and interact, do their whole thing. So in the mechanical sense, almost geometrically, it's like, yeah, this is so clearly a war film on the surface, but it's not a terribly long film, and it doesn't take very long to understand this sort of new vocabulary it's building for itself, in the sense that there are no sort of clever lines. And Alex Garland, started as a novelist.
There's very little dialogue.
Period. Yeah. Right? Like, in other words, especially in the first third of the film, which is very intentionally mundane and banal and boring, perfect fertile ground for someone like Garland, who's very funny, very good writer. 28 years later, he's firmly back in sort of the writer's chair, which was a choice he made of his own volition. There was ample opportunity to do something very, very sort of expected, very quippy. And we get versions of that, arguably, but I would say more non-verbally. But the point being, this movie just, I would say it is quite economic and quite transparent in its conveying of this sort of, again, new grammar or vocab that it is sort of experimenting with in real time. I keep looking over my shoulder because I've got the movie on mute behind me, like a silly person. But that really, to me,
that is your approach, isn't it? You're often podcasting with the movie
osmosis.
I learned this about you listening to your show. Yeah.
It's one way. So just to hopefully land on something coherent, I think this movie succeeds in achieving its own its own dogma in a way. It achieves its manifesto, sort of. And that particular approach it's very deliberately deviating and circumventing around all the sort of easy autopilot emotions that I think we have just become so used to. And I think that's just one of many reasons that this film, if I could just sum it up in one word, it is provocative. I think it's provocative in terms of content and form. And that's why I just cannot, stop thinking about it, essentially.
I think one of the things I'm hearing from you is that one of the ways in which the film is struggling and trying to overcome the burden and of being a war film is in a way to abstract away from war. So you talked about the choreography and the dance of the SEALs, and I think that's interesting because I think one reaction to hyper violence, and is to really to think of it in an abstract way. To just think of take John Wick. John Wick's a nice example. I mean, and it's John Wick is basically the action is basically just ballet. It's just ballet for dudes, and this is like been borne out in the fact that like the most recent John Wick spinoff is literally just called Ballerina. So you might think, okay, so this film is embracing that. It's decontextualizing this. These guys might as well be doing whatever they're doing. They're just engaged in this kind of dance of competence or whatever. And they're going around and they're talking to one another. They're coordinating, but the guns are kind of incidental to that. Like it's just a choreographed, the large choreographed dance. Of course, there is pain and suffering, but the other aspect in which it's a decontextualization is we don't get any sense of the broader purpose behind this. I mean, it's kind of funny. Like one of the criticisms of Civil War is that, people were like, well, I don't know what the politics of the various sides are.
Yeah, why are California and Texas allies?
Yeah, like who knows what's going on? And Garland was like, well, that's not what the movie's about. It's about the photojournalists. And I think in this movie, what's amazing about this movie, based on a true story, real events that happened to this guy, Ray Mendoza and Elliot, and so on, all these various people who were portrayed in the film. And yet this could have been this is just as easily could have been just like a fictionalized. This could have been set anywhere. Could have been set on Mars. The exact same situation could have been completely taken out of the context of the U.S.-Iraq war and everything. And I think that is one thing that Garland is playing with. It again is this kind of abstraction, decontextualization, trying to take us out of the broader context in which this is happening. But to focus in particular on things like movement and coordination and positioning and then these other themes which are interestingly also more abstract, which comes at the very end of it's iterated at the very end of the film when you get the title card. It's like they did their duty, right, or whatever. I can't remember exactly what the title card said, but
we're always answering the call.
They answer the call, right? So this idea that there's a kind of sacrifice, and I like this idea that there's a kind of sacrifice that's made by the soldier that, okay, forget what the soldier was doing. Were they killing innocent people? Were they whatever? They answered the call. And what's interesting to me about that is that it makes the sort of the difficulty of what they're doing, and it also makes it's fraught, but it makes the kind of virtue of what they're doing like really intriguing because just imagine if you're in their situation. So suppose you're a soldier and you don't agree with the Iraq war, but nonetheless, the people who you have sworn an oath to defend, that is the American people by way of the proxies of George Bush and so on, have told you need to go fight in this war. So there you go. You go and you fight, you do what you're told. I think it's interesting that the soldiers in this don't have any sense, at least we're not given any sense of why they're in this room, why they're doing this Overwatch position, like where the other people are, what the general like broad strategy is, why they're even fighting in Iraq. None of that is part of the film. And yet they're just doing it. And I think I'll just tell you, there is absolutely no way I could do that.
No,
I am not. I'm the kind of person who's like, if someone's like, you need to run into that burning building, I'd be like, why? You need to give me a reason. And the answer can't just be no, because it's your duty. I'd be like, no. Duty is not a sufficient reason. I need to know what the hell is going on that you are requiring me to go in this building. But these are the kind of guys who just would do it because they were told to do it. Now we can think of that as dumb or idiotic, but we can also think of it as a necessary thing. If you think of in a geopolitical situation where there's inevitably going to be some degree of armed conflict, you want defending your country people like this, people who are willing to make a sacrifice for and not unthinkingly.
Yeah, who are straightforward and really fucking courageous.
The fraught example is go kill this guy, but the not fraught example is go run into this burning building. There's a child in there, save them, and you're just don't even think, just go do it, and And I think there is a virtue to that, a virtue to the kind of unthinking obedience that is required sometimes when you have a certain system that's set up where you need people that can act in that situation and need to act in those kinds of situations. So, I mean, that's my pitch for the army. Now, the flip side, of course, is, and here's the thing. I think that's Alex Garland's pitch. I really do. I think he's saying, okay, whatever you think about the political, justification for the war in Iraq, set that aside. Let's just look at these guys and the sacrifice they made. Forget that, they were shooting at people these are their homes. Yeah, that's true. But they didn't have a choice as to what they were doing. They were ordered to go there. They did so, I mean, of course they enlisted, but so there's some choice in there. But they enlisted for a higher calling, And anyway, I find that very interesting. I'm not necessarily defending it, but I think that's partly what the film is getting at. And again, I think it gets at it via this kind of abstraction. And Jim, sorry, I was about to call you Phil. I don't know why. It's I have Phil and Liam on the mind. I'm so sorry.
They're our
Jim,
buddies. They're our buddies, mutual friends.
Does that ring?
Yes.
They are our buddies. That's right. Does that ring true to you? And then also, what do you think about that? Do you think that if that is Alex Garland, do you agree that that's maybe what he's getting at with the film? And if you do agree with that, do you think that's a plausible? Would you nod along if Alex Garland said, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do with the film? Or would you say, no, I still think, there is no anti-war, whatever, you shouldn't have made such a film. I'm interested in this question because I think it's the question that was on a lot of people's minds, I think, when they initially saw the movie.
The way I've come to understand one of Garland's primary motives behind making this movie, and tell me if I'm in alignment with your overall sentiment that you just expressed. I think I am, but my biggest takeaway from when this movie came out, just sort of devouring all the podcast interviews that Garland and Mendoza did in promoting the movie, they're very, very, very interesting. Again, I find them to be really interesting people. It was my understanding through researching during that time that Garland was very, very motivated by getting to depict in realistic terms, in something approaching real time as well, what we request of soldiers. That's how I remember him specifically describing it, and that's clearly stuck with me. And I think that's a really interesting way to articulate it, because sort of like what you were saying a moment ago, Justin, Garland, and I think this is why he's become a little polarizing or what have you, especially with his grump visage. He's almost gleeful in his again circumventing and sidestepping of direct explanation. But there's like an asterisk there for me, because he's provocative without being a troll. He's too old to be doing, whatever, being like a 4chan weirdo incel. He's too smart, too old, too intelligent, and emotionally intelligent too. I think especially Devs, I think is his masterpiece. If that was a movie, I probably would have requested that. But I think he has a vulnerable streak, and I think he's actually very open-hearted, despite maybe the way he comes across sometimes. But I think he's just very, very, again, not only interested in that thing I just said of what are we asking of these people? Put everything aside for a second. What are we asking? And do we know really what it's like? Do we know the source of all that stuff? Do we know the source of all that PTSD, et cetera, et cetera? Let's take a look at it. And really quickly, before I forget, because Letterboxd is my, addiction at the moment, I was browsing reviews, not even for this movie. I forget what movie it was. It's something completely different. But this particular person wrote something, I think it was actually about a Michael Haneke movie, and they said, cinema is supposed to show us stuff we don't want to see. And that has stuck with me since reading it. And I feel like Warfare very
Haneke's good at that.
neatly fits into that category. And when I think of it in those terms, I'm like, yeah, this is a movie, because it's showing me something I don't want to see, and certainly don't ever, ever, ever want to experience. So in that way, I think, again, not to this is the temptation of this movie. it almost baits you into assigning morality to it. And I think that is like Garland loves that. Again, I don't think he's doing it in a trolly way. I think A, he's genuinely fascinated, and B, this is the other reason I like him. I genuinely feel respected by him as a creator versus audience member. Because if you listen or read or look up a lot of these promo interviews he and Mendoza did, one of his key refrains that I can recall is, because of course he's asked like, oh, a lot of these interviewers who are great, they're sort of dancing around, well, what's your party? What's your political party? Blah, 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 all this stuff, which I get. And I want those answers too. But Garland's like, listen, I trust my audience and I trust that they're smart. And I trust that they don't need me to say X, Y, Z to get what they're going to get out of this movie. And very quickly, because I know it's going to exit my brain if I don't say it now, I once did a lecture on Yasujiro Ozu, specifically Tokyo Story. And I remember discussing how one of Ozu's key sort of weapons in his arsenal is narrative ellipsis. It's just when he cuts months later without so much as a title card or any fanfare whatsoever. It's just we've moved on with the most basic cinematic tool there is, a cut. Narrative ellipsis. Very simple, right? And Warfare almost feels like the inverse of that, where it's almost like it's bookended by ellipses in a way. It's a very abstract thought that I haven't even fully been able to verbalize for myself, but I think you know what I'm getting at, because as we've already touched on, this is a movie that very intentionally sidesteps traditional context. So it's almost like Garland is like, no. That thing you do in Hacksaw Ridge and Wind Talkers and We Were Soldiers and Platoon, we're not going to cut away. We are going to immerse you for a sustained period of time, something approaching real time, and we're going to make you see something that you don't want to see. There's some morbid utility to that, I think.
Yeah, so that's what I want to ask about. So I agree with all of that. I think Garland, and you know the interviews better than me, but that sounds exactly right to me, that he's like, I want to show you the details of what is the cause of the PTSD. But I want to know, like, why? Why subject an audience to that? I think that's the interesting question. I think that's what all these interviewers are probing in some sense. I mean, do you have thoughts on this, Laura? Like, why do you think, is it, and there's two questions here. One is, why does Alex Garland think it was important to do this? I mean, of course, I'll just briefly say, Ray Mendoza, we saw some interviews with him, and he said the reason is he wanted to tell this story because Elliot, one of the guys who was injured,
the mustached man, who's the sniper and medic,
he has no memory of the event because he was so badly injured, and so he kind of made it. That's why the film is dedicated to him. Okay, so there's one reason is like but like, of course you could just tell the story. Why visually depict in such harrowing detail this? And the second version of the question is, what is the utility of that? Like, so maybe Garland has some view about this, but like, do we agree with him about that? I just want to swing at you quickly, Laura, first. I have a lot of views on this, but I want to.
I don't know, honey. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we finished this movie and I was like, wow. Yeah, no, there was a lot of craft in that. I respected it. I did not enjoy myself, nor do I know why anybody would want to watch that.
Yeah.
Hard pass for me. And that's how I feel about a lot of war movies, but when there is some more narrative, when there is some more pithy dialogue, when there's something more traditional for me to hook into, I think I'm on the line more. But this sort of like visceral onslaught was hard, and I'm not sure what the purpose is. So I want to hear what your opinions are. I feel like I know what Alex Garland is like interested in technically or like formally. Like I was keyed into like his use of audio, but
cool, yeah. So you were sort of appreciating it on a level of craft.
That was the only way I could appreciate it, because I think pretty quickly, like in the first half of the it's really the first half of the movie when you're a little bored, but in like a way where you're like, this is going to be horrendous. I just don't know how. I don't know when. Something's coming in through the window. Something's going to go wrong. But right now I'm just listening to them like reconfirm radio chatter and write stuff down on notebooks. And I'm like bored and I'm like stiff along with them. But I know it's going to be horrible. At that point, I was like, okay, I think I understand what this movie's doing, so I'm going to lock in on something else.
Jim, the same question to you, but before we get to this question, I'm going to highlight three things. So, and you can pick off whatever you want here. So, I'm going to give you 3 quotes from 3 different critics that I think summarize everything we've just said. I find this quite interesting that we're circling, I think, a lot of the same issues that I think a lot of the critics have been interested in. But I find that I have not been satisfied with any of the critical things that I've read in particular, just because they don't have enough time to really dig into this. They have to get the review out and quickly. Okay, so here's 3 different quotes, 3 different critics. And I'll say why I think this connects to each of the things you've said, Jim. So first is Dana Stevens. She says, by choosing to skip over such traditional narrative strategies as character differentiation, the filmmakers leave out an element that is crucial to the viewer's engagement. I think this is something that we're touching on as far as the abstracting away from traditional,
Elision.
as you put it, elision, and the traditional things of a war film, which is like, you want to have like a heroic moment and you got to know who this guy is and who that guy is and what he's fighting for.
You gotta have a few lines to establish this guy's got a girlfriend. This one has a personality,
Okay, but the film is not interested in any of that. It just abstracts away. These people are interchangeable. All the characters are interchangeable. If you didn't know them, if you didn't know the actors from something else, you would have no way of differentiating.
I didn't know Will Poulter was CO until he had like lost his shit and couldn't like serve as CO because I didn't understand how anybody's related to anybody.
Okay, so that's the first point. Which I think we've touched on. Okay, so again, the question is ultimately like, why make a movie like this? The second is Manohla Dargis. I doubt that John Wayne would like Warfare, which is also high praise. That's a great quote from Manohla Dargis. And again, I think that speaks to that this is the antithesis of a classical Hollywood war film. It's going in the opposite direction in a lot of ways. Okay, the third quote is David Ehrlich. He says, it's difficult to discern exactly what Garland and Mendoza intended with Warfare. And then he goes on to say, and that task might seem to be made exponentially more difficult by their unexpected decision to pepper the end credits with upbeat footage from the making of the film. So again, I think Ehrlich's asking the right question. Like, what is the point of this? We've just been subjected to, in your words, Laura, like an ordeal, something that's not enjoyable.
I said onslaught.
Onslaught. I actually found it quite enjoyable to watch.
You were loving it.
I really enjoyed this film. But why? Like, why do that? It's like, the answer is obvious in a movie like Schindler's List. It's just obvious.
Yes.
Like, he's like, this is incredibly important for me to tell this story so people understand so that this never happens again. Okay. Why this? And Jim, I'm just curious what you think about this.
Yeah, I love it. I love the way you're thinking about this. Those are fantastic quotes. One place I landed in thinking about this exact question, which is kind of the question, right? It's kind of the question for me. Why do it this way? Why make this movie like this? And I'm not saying this is how I feel with a capital F, and this is an unmoving thought or opinion, but this might seem like a weird comparison, but in preparing for this talk, I was revisiting some notes I had taken for Timo Giganto's The Shadow Strays, a different movie, a capital A action movie from the last year or so. And in revisiting those notes, I saw that I had written this passage. I said, similar to the way horror movies create a safe space for us to engage with our fears, the best action movies offer a permissible arena for us to confront and exercise our relationship to violence. So that's action movies, right?
Yep, sure.
Warfare, at least not conventionally. I don't consider an action movie, and certainly not in the way Commando is, not in the way Face Off is, not in the way Hard Boiled is, The Matrix. it contains
there's no
action.
catharsis.
It contains conflict.
There's no catharsis, and I think that's the crucial thing. Is that in those movies, the action is a catharsis that's important for the viewer has to go through. They want to see John Wick like killing people because it's a revenge mission. They killed his dog or whatever. That's the catharsis you want. You want to see the hero kind of triumph. This has no catharsis to it. This is just
nor
violence.
is it like nor is it like an anti-war, like there was no point to that whatsoever kind of feeling
it's
either
not scolding.
at the end of it.
It's not scolding. I mean, it's
in
more
some
detached.
ways you're like, okay, this like they went into a house, they defended the house, they all died, the people's house got fucked up. We don't know why. Like it could have like had that note, except for that the way that David Ehrlich points out, like this movie was made by the veteran who was there for a veteran who was there, who comes to set. Like it's important for them to like relive this memory together, piece it back together, have their own catharsis, even if nobody else is having catharsis.
Not cathartic to the audience, I'll tell you that.
No, not cathartic to the audience. Although I think we saw an interview in which one of the Navy SEALs who was there said it was cathartic to kind of like experience it all together and get the pieces of their memory coming together.
In particular, I think one of the important things for him was it was like forgiving themselves for mistakes they made.
Yeah.
And things like that, where that was a crucial thing. That was part of the like exercising process they had to go through, was that they had felt like, oh, if only I hadn't done this and I made this mistake and I didn't act in this way.
Yeah.
But then seeing it and sort of understanding the chaos, it kind of helped them process that dimension of it.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's certainly a kind of,
that's an interesting therapeutic exercise for a small group of people.
It's
and
certainly
like very
also
cool
something you
that
could,
like he wanted to like enable that project in a cinematic way, in the way that Alex Garland is very interested in sound and movement and dance and like, you know what I mean? Like Alex Garland's like, I'm gonna Alex Garland that while you guys are working through this, you know? And I think that's kind of cool. I don't know. Alex Garland I don't know that he really knows why, but he's really interested in people who like just walk into the abyss, right? Or walk into death, like war journalists, women who walk into a bubble that is most certainly going to like destroy them or like change them on an atomic level. And they're just like, all right, here we go. Like I feel like that's, or people on the beach who go to an island because they need to go to the ends of the earth.
Or people who reignite the sun.
People who reignite the sun and they're probably going to die. Like all of these people, like they're doing the most insane death wish, action, sometimes out of like a heroic duty, sometimes out of like, we don't know what, like this sort of like drive to like face the end or like face the apocalypse.
Well, because no one else would do it.
And no one else will do it. Like this is definitely something that seems to consume Alex Garland and a lot of his projects. I don't know that he knows why, but he's just, I mean, we
Annihilation too. You go into the color out of space.
That's what I said. He goes into the bubble. I said four women going into the bubble. I had to call out
I
one
thought you
of
were
the
talking
movies.
about the beach.
That's awesome. I also called out the beach, but I also just had to mention, like this movie is really masculine, but let's also not forget that like, Alex Garland has made his movies about women who also like
go into the breach.
The breach
Reach.
the breach beach and
Devs
don't
too,
fight a shark, but tell everybody that they did. Sorry, that's my favorite part of the beach.
Yeah. All right, Jim, sorry, but to get back on track, I mean, I'm enjoying all this, but
I was so on track.
You were on track, but I also, we interrupted Jim.
So on track.
Sorry.
No, what? No. Well, listen, I think hopefully a quasi segue in that wonderful insight is the fact that this is $20 million therapy for Ray Mendoza. And I say that with no
and his
malice,
friends.
like no judgment.
Yeah.
Like I would do that if I had $20 million and A24's backing. Like that's, and I'm not the first person to point that out, but like I very glibly, wrote to myself after this most recent viewing, like this is $20 million CBT. It is cognitive behavioral theater, because that's kind of how they shot it too, apparently. Like even when actors, I should say, were off camera, they were in character. They were doing their thing because the camera, if I recall correctly, was basically just free roaming. And they had the run of this set for however many weeks or months. So, I mean, it's kind of a cliche that, oh yeah, it was like theater when we were shooting it. But like, I kind of feel like this one earns it a little bit due to the fact that, as we were saying earlier, the dialogue is so incidental. Like it is aggressively jargon. And the filmmakers are highly aware of the fact that we're not going to get what maybe a Bradley is the first time we hear it, nor are we going to be able to connect that word to that word to that word. Broad strokes will understand they're fucked. They need help. I get that. Communication is hard right now. But again, it is just almost gleeful in the fact that it puts up these barriers in the sense that it's like, well, does this guy have a family back home? Who recruited him years ago? What's his class history, etc. It's just, it forgoes all of that, and it's of course very visceral, as we've said, very experiential as well. But I don't know. I think if we want to talk about just metrics for success, one of them for me is just the fact that it just keeps revealing new sort of drawers of almost like Socratic thought, just again around the nature of this medium. It's like, and it's not that it's not that shocking. It's not that perverse or anything necessarily. It's just, maybe it's the fact that this is such a genre, like a Western, say, or a superhero movie. We know what a war movie looks like. So even when the dials are adjusted just ever so slightly in different directions, at least in this case, it feels like, oh, we feel the difference compared to Hacksaw Ridge, the movie I keep referencing. Another movie I like, which I feel weird about.
Fair. Okay. Yeah. I do not like Hacksaw Ridge because, for the exact reason that I like this movie, it's because Hacksaw Ridge is
very
like
helpful.
Preach. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a great contrast because it's a preachy, like, this guy's
Christian.
so great and all this and that. Yeah. And this film is just like, these guys did their job and they got, whatever. But to I guess put a button on this point about the anti-war film and why make this film and why depict this and all that. Here's a quote from a BBC article that I was just like trying to find who gave the quote initially of "there's no such thing as an anti-war film," and then it was like, oh, it's attributed to Truffaut. And then there was this BBC article, and in the article, I forget actually the author's name, but they wrote part of what they think the encapsulation of the Truffaut quote is: movies will inevitably glorify combat when they portray the adventure and thrill of conflict and the camaraderie between soldiers. Okay, now what I think Garland is doing in this film is doing that, but not thereby glorifying like violence or combat. But it is portraying the adventure and thrill of conflict and the camaraderie and like the pain and suffering and the honor and the heroism of these soldiers. While at the same time not glorifying the violence. And I think that's the really interesting thing is that, and I think that's why I was picking up, the things I was picking up on is like, I would never want to be there. For two reasons. One is it's really a bad spot to be in, that people are getting killed. But the second thing is I have no idea why I'm there and I don't have any agency in being there. There's a certain degree of privilege where you can just sit back and just be like, yeah, but the film is like not engaging with the perspective of the Iraqis and like that's not cool and representation and stuff. And I'm like, that's true, fine. It is a fact that there are no Iraqi perspectives really, except for the family, are portrayed in this film. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't think that's Alex Garland's fault or responsibility at all. I think if anything, it would be irresponsible for him to be trying to then portray their perspective. I think someone should, but it's not him.
Yeah, that's not the
be.
task of this movie or his
And
task.
I just think like that reads to me as a very privileged critique. This film is basically just saying like, put yourself in the perspective of these guys for 90 minutes. And then you leave the theater and you're like, man, your guys' reaction is like, that was horrible. And I think that's the reaction he wants you to have. It's like, that was absolutely horrible. It was harrowing. It was horrible.
Yes.
And not worry, of course, was it necessary? Was it not? Of course, we can ask those questions. Those are the questions that you ask when you're in the armchair or in the at the Situation Room. Those are not the questions these guys get to ask.
No.
They don't get that. They're just not privileged to that kind of level of strategic planning or political maneuvering. It's
It comes back to that huge question: what is this movie's purpose? Specifically, what is its purpose in relation to sort of the ubiquity of real-time war images that just show up in our feed?
Yeah.
They're just in our feed. Like, we are immersed in it. That's life. That's day-to-day
life. Yeah, but
life.
social media, it's even worse now,
Yes,
right? Because
is.
there's people on the ground who are just like filming like bombs going off and stuff. Yeah.
Here's what it's like in Gaza right now. Here's what it's like in Ukraine right now.
So, I mean, one question that arises out of that for me is like, well, it's brain breaking to an extent, to the extent that we're seeing real stuff every day. We're sort of inviting it in. And then we have a movie like this, and the way it sort of feels to me intuitively, Warfare, the film, is that it's like, it seems broadly aware that we're steeped in horror, ambiently and sometimes directly. It seems very aware of that. But going back to that question of why this way, as far as I can tell, Garland and Mendoza, or at least the final product of their union, it seems like it is attempting to really concentrate that stuff that we feel ambiently, almost create like an epicenter out of it. Like, because when you are, and this is, I'm glad I saw this in theaters. It must have been opening weekend. But what's sort of occurring to me in real time right now is just sort of the value of an uninterrupted experience where you are, again, by design, destabilized by the filmmakers for 30 to 50% of the runtime, right? So versus scrolling away like, oh, that's horrible. Next.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So I think that's the thing, is being inundated. So the first step of like social media and imagery and television is like, the first things that Vietnam. Okay, you get images of people getting, murdered and stuff, people lighting themselves on fire, and et cetera. Okay. And suddenly we're like, holy shit. Like, and this galvanizes the anti-war movement. Okay, but then you get cynicism because it's like so much. It's like a constant. Now it's like, and then we grew up with it constantly, and now the next generation is growing up with it like on their phones all the time. Like if you go on Blue Sky, you just scroll for 5 seconds, you're gonna get some image of a starving child in Gaza. Absolutely horrifying. And that will be next to an image of like a joke. Just like some joke about a random joke.
Very common.
And you're just like, it's one after the other. It's just like meme, someone complaining about Donald Trump, starving child, like horrible thing. And when you just put all that stuff together, you become numb to it. It's just one more thing after another. And I think that's exactly right to what you're saying, Jim, is like, this movie, you can't. It's not designed for you to just be like, scroll away to the next thing. It's like, no, sit here for 90 minutes in this suffering, and I'm not gonna let you look away. These guys gonna keep screaming for 40 of those 90 minutes, and you're gonna be nauseated or whatever. You're gonna feel horrible, and that's the world we've come to. I mean, like, where you might think that has to be done because people have become so inundated with these imagery that they don't even understand the human toll of what's happening.
We're not letting it in anymore in the same way. Yeah.
Even though we have access to all these images, that's the crazy thing. It's like they're too ubiquitous.
Yeah, but you can't open that gate. You can't open that door all the time.
Of course, that's true. No, that's true too. Yeah, because of course, if you watch this movie all the time, then it's the same problem.
You'd be like despondent.
You would become numb to it.
Yeah.
So the whole point is like, I think the movie's designed, just you watch it once, you say, great, I never want to watch that again, unless you bought the 4K like us, and we'll be, We use it
Unless
as,
you're watching it on silent right now while you're doing a podcast, just
Who would
on
do
a
that?
loop.
or you the reason you bought it on 4K disc is because you heard it was a really good
Reference disc? You
disc
sick fuck.
for your sound system. That is so fucking horror. I can't even believe I just said that on
Yeah,
it's
like,
like-
yeah,
it's-
you're like,
I'm-
welcome to my home theater.
In all
That is why I
seriousness,
bought it on
that is
4K.
relevant, and that is why I think this movie is just like an incredible access point to just discuss the medium, because it's like, oh my god, what did I just say? I want to test my new subwoofer during the scene when Cosmo Jarvis gets his legs blown off.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like his screaming is really crystal clear in this. And
the Atmos mix is incredible.
Atmos, you can hear one guy screaming in pain to the left and another guy screaming in pain to the right.
Great
It's
separation of the
amazing.
soundscage.
But it's true. I truly do find it fascinating, and this is an annoying comparison. Like we've already said the words John Wick, which is helpful. We also grew up, of course, during the birth of the Matrix, which of course had its own sort of controversy and relationship to violence. That's a huge thing, an epoch essentially, right? And it just, the fact that we are in a culture that correctly loves John Wick. I'm a huge John Wick fan. Shocking.
Correct.
I know. But I have yet to articulate this in a way that I find satisfying. But we mentioned the Truffaut quote. All right, no anti-war movies. All right, we got it out of the way. It's the perfunctory, sort of obligatory preface. We've said that. But is there something to be said for like a sobering real-time war movie that is a horror movie in so many ways versus a John Wick that is like you pointed out earlier, cathartic in its DNA, not only cathartic in the sense that, all right, this guy whose dog got killed gets revenge on the dog killers, but like every millimeter of a kill along the way to that final boss is depicted for maximum bloodlust and satisfaction.
Yeah,
and I love it. But like it's fun. It's context, right? The tone, like a huge gulf of tone and millions of thousands of choices along the way that made this movie this and this movie that. Again, completely different aims, but I bring it up just because it's like, well, John Wick, like, sort of objectively is glorifying violence. But, I think the thing that Garland is correctly tapping into is like, I trust my audience. Like, there is a faith that I think he has, and a knowledge of the people who will most likely be seeing this that, they'll get it. Obviously, the veterans will be like, oh my God, they fucking nailed it. But for general audiences, I think Garland is just so self-aware that, they'll get it and they'll be able to take away what they take away from it. I mentioned, narrative ellipsis earlier, and just sort of this very dumb, smart guy idea of like this weird liminal space that this movie Warfare occupies. And we don't know what comes after, and we don't know what comes before. And it's really frustrating, and it flies in the face of a lot of conventional things. But I think one really powerful thing that emerges in doing that is that on either side of this 90-minute movie, Garland again has the forethought that, I mentioned this to my friend when the movie came out, like, I think there's an ingenious quality to setting it during the Iraq War, because it is one that is recent enough that most people remember it, but it is not so ripped from the headlines that we just detach and turn our brains off like we do on Instagram, right? It's that sort of happy medium where, oh yeah, we remember that, but it's not, say, ripped from the headlines, to use that phrase again.
Yeah.
And I think what that, it just helps create just enough distance. That's sort of been a theme of the conversation, is just sort of the limits of distance and how that can dehumanize other people. but also the ways that, certainly in this movie, in the way that it is a period film and it is retrospective, we have a couple decades to look back on that with some level of clarity that we certainly didn't have, I think, in the same way that we do now.
Yeah, I think another way of putting this point is that I think the film doesn't have to put any context because we already know the context. We all know what happened. We all know that the war was like a huge failure premised on false, evidence that had been effectively planted by the Bush administration, given out to the New York Times as though it was real, and then give back. This is all like now like relatively common knowledge to the point where,
and that it dragged on for 15 years after all that stuff did or did not happen.
It's super unpopular. Even Republicans, they voted for Donald Trump, a guy on the grounds that he wouldn't ever get them in an Iraq war, and he was against the war. If there's anything that's like, in a world of like politicization, if there's anything that's unpartisan, it's the Iraq war was a waste of time. It was a horrible waste of time. So the film is in a way like it just takes that for granted. It's like we don't need to add to this. And I think what's kind of interesting too, just to add to that, is that when we watched some interviews with the two guys, the two soldiers who were wounded. So that would be Elliot and the other one was Sam in the film, but I think his name is
Joe
in real life. And but these guys said they were like the crazy thing. And again, I love that the film doesn't put this in there, but they're like the crazy thing is that we were 400 meters away from home base. 400 meters. That's like a couple football fields away. Like that's how close they were to utter safety. Their home base was like, they could have run to it if they weren't going to get shot, you know? And so
the only clue of that was when they were talking to the second troop, and the second troop was like, yeah, we heard you knocking down that wall last night. Like, why didn't you? We can hear really that because we're so close.
They're all really close. And that's like the kind of like crazy, like futility and almost like, did they accomplish anything?
Completely.
But I love that the film it's just like, nope, we're going to end. Yes. And you can research that if you want. That's not what this film is about. This film is about what these dudes went through.
Mm-hmm.
On like a Wednesday, because then apparently, like IMDb said that 2 days later, the whole group, except for Elliot and Joe, like the two injured guys, went on another mission 3 days later.
So they're just like back in the, and because that's the truth. I mean, these guys we should also just point out, these guys are Navy SEALs. So these guys are not like, if Jim and I were in the Army, we would not be
They're
Navy
not like
SEAls.
enlisted folk, like your regular enlisted folks.
The regular folk. These are like the cream of the crop, right? These guys are special forces dudes, and and I, that's why I'm always interested. I'm like,
they're
oh my god,
surgical.
They're surgical. They're tactical, and and there's an expectation. Like these guys have gone through hell just training. And so it's like, great, you went through this experience. You got, a little bit of, you got concussion or whatever in the case of the CO.
Yeah, that sucks. Take a nap, go back out there.
2 days later, you watch a couple of the Call on Me videos and then get right back out there because you rejuvenated, right? You watched the music video. Okay, you're ready to go. Let's go. And I think it is crazy. Yeah, like it was a Wednesday.
It's nuts. It's nuts.
On that, Jim, can I ask you, so like, I think it's a bold move to start this movie with this Call on Me music video. Yes. Like, what do you think of that? What do you make of that?
Hell yeah. The music. This, as I said off mic, this is the biggest blind spot for me, just whether it's Letterboxd, whether it's New York Times, whatever, this is the thing I do not see talked about. And it makes a lot of sense. The music, because there is virtually none. We are bookended, as you just pointed out, very first scene of the movie, Call on Me. I think Eric Pride's, a period accurate club song. And I remember walking into the theater. It's not like me to be late, but I remember walking into the theater with my wife as that song was blaring in a movie theater. And I'm pretty sure we sat front row because the theater at the time, huge gap between front row and screen, which is how all theaters should be like that, because it's great. Anyway, so immediately pummeled, and I'm so glad we're talking about this, because this is a thought I've had since Civil War came out. And I'm pretty sure I saw that on opening weekend as well. And my biggest personal takeaway from Civil War was that that was a movie, at least in part, that was dealing with almost simultaneous states of ecstasy and terror, and how the main characters of that film have completely entangled those two emotions, and they almost have no idea how to separate them. They've just conflated and collapsed into one another. I think of the scene where the one group of journalist friends is like jumping from one car to the next, and it's harrowing as it's happening. You're like, why are you doing this? This is terrifying. This is dumb. And then they succeed, and everyone is like losing their minds. They are blissed out. They're like, that was the coolest thing ever. And it just summed up the movie so clearly for me. Just these journalists in a very unflattering way, quite often just seeing how they almost, there's an addiction quality to it. But back to that idea, that notion of ecstasy versus terror. I feel like Warfare, again, being so closely related to its predecessor, I feel like it's doing a little bit of that same idea. I feel like it's iterating on that a little bit, certainly to the degree that the first scene is this ecstatic club song, and the guys are losing their shit, just getting pumped up. And then, of course, hard cut to them on this recon mission towards the house that they'll eventually set up camp in. And we even see them mimicking the dance moves in the middle of the night, right? So this is how, in their own words, they get pumped up before a mission. But we see that, again, no dialogue whatsoever, but we are seeing them just being utterly ecstatic. And then what's the rest of the movie? It is horror. It is the worst thing that could probably happen to that group of people. One of the worst things. And the only other music we get, of course, the Call on Me music video is diegetic, but the end credits, we get our one and only non-diegetic song, which is this really chilling and amazing song by the band Low called Dancing in Blood. And I remember confirming that after walking out of the theater on that first viewing, be like, Dancing in Blood. Fuck. It just felt like such a variation on that theme of Garland playing with ecstasy and terror. Of course, much different proportions here. And again, very intentionally. But the question I've been wanting to ask you both, specifically as it relates to the music, is, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, how, you know, if you watched any of the special features on the aforementioned 4K, I believe Garland points out he uses music as an example of how he would circumvent editorializing in his own words. And I thought that was a really helpful example in terms of, again, the largest or larger aims of the filmmakers. It's like, no. When all the Marines are lined up and getting ready to exit the house in a line, and they've got the translators in the front, there is no rousing score from James Horner or something. He's not doing, say, the Peter Berg thing, the Lone Survivor thing, right? The Deepwater Horizon thing, whatever, the Hacksaw Ridge thing. And I thought that was just, that's a very clear-cut example to understand one of these key aims. I bring that up because when does he insert music that is non-diegetic, that does not happen in universe? It is during the postscript and it is during the credits, when we see the actual soldiers side by side with the actors who played them. And that, to me, just so clearly just summarizes and encapsulates, this is when Garland is almost rewarding us with a subtle editorializing. But he's doing it through music, rather than looking into the lens and saying, hi, I'm Alex Garland. I voted Democrat last year. I think, you know what I mean? The one other thing that occurred to me with that Low song, Minneapolis band, who Garland has used before in that limited series I mentioned, Devs, he used another one of their songs, so he has a relationship to this band's music. But the thing that I think stood out very quickly upon, recognizing the song that first time was like, this sounds like somebody sampled the idle hum of a drone monitor, like we get in the beginning of the film, and it just cuts to that very eerie, very stark close-up of just the aerial, like almost sepia-toned CRT, staticky, crackling camera, just looking down on where these soldiers are. That song, that Low song, sounds like it sampled military gear and then just quantized it, and they sang over it in the best possible way. I think it's an incredible song.
That's really
but
interesting.
like, what are your actual emotions? Like, what does the song, like, does it exacerbate what you're already feeling? Does it contrast it? I'm super curious.
That's really interesting. So I cannot recall the song right now off the top of my head, but I have the lyrics.
Very
right here,
drony, very machine-like, with like ghostly vocals.
Haunting.
Exactly.
Ghostly. I remember.
Yeah.
I remember. I don't think I could like sing it to you now, but I have the memory of the feeling. I mean, funnily enough, I feel like it got coupled with my relief of just like, okay, that's over. Even though it's not like a song that's meant to kind of like be a palate cleanser, it continues to keep you in that like very upsetting space. But in my head, when I think about it and the way I was feeling when that song hit, I was just like, and we're done. But yeah, maybe we'll have to play it on Justin, you can play a little bit of it.
Here's the thing. Whenever I play music, Spotify gets pissed off at me and is like, hey, you're playing copyrighted music. I'm like, fuck you, Spotify. It's fair use. But anyway, whatever.
Yeah, but do you think saying fuck you, Spotify is a good choice when they keep pulling our podcast?
They're going to appreciate it.
I'm sorry. We love you. We love you, Spotify. Can you please let us play a 10-second clip of Dancing in Blood so we can talk about it?
So that we can talk about it.
I do think it is.
Know.
Well, I mean, look, to go back to something we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast, this movie is a lot of interesting choreography. That's a big part of it. Abstracted choreography, dancing. Of course, Skull's got a lot of blood. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm looking at the lyrics here. I'll read you a couple of them. What could I say? Taken aback. All that you gave wasn't enough. What could I say? Taken aback. I mean, what I'm getting from just these lyrics is like, it's like a bunch of fragments. Like it's like I'm being forced to piece together a series of unrelated fragments. Tear in the coat, pierced in the side, keep in the know, throw in the earth, dancing in blood. Like, what the hell is going on? There's no narrative structure to it. Yes. It's just a series of decontextualized lines, a little bit like
images and feelings.
Yeah, images and feelings, a little bit like the dialogue in the film where the guys are just like, Bravo Forge, that's just like, okay,
this is what
it's a bunch of
with the monitor. It sounds like somebody made that into a song.
Yeah. Very interesting.
By that.
I very cool, Jim. I'm glad that you brought that up because I had not clocked the final song, and this is really good. I think this is an important part. I think you're right that people have not been focused on about the bookending music.
And Alex Garland, like his films, what ties them together for me, besides people walking into death or a catastrophe or the abyss, is like that. The musical dance numbers, like he loves.
It's true. Annihilation.
Right?
Yeah, there's that
Annihilation,
ending dance
Ex Machina. Yeah. Even Men, just like if I can like, there are always moments in his movies that I like stick with me for forever. But there are always ones that are like singing or dancing. But her just in the cave going, huh, huh, huh.
My wife references that all the time.
Yeah, interesting.
But yes, he's so drawn to it. I think that like, because I was thinking about him as a writer versus a director, but I think he has so much talent in including these ecstatic, weird, haunting moments of combinations of song and dance that make you feel kind of unsettled. That it makes sense to me that of course his use of music or not using music would be extremely purposeful and thoughtful.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying. Love that. Laura, that's such a great insight. Another great insight. Because I was weirdly thinking about the climax of Annihilation, which is super choreographed. It is a dance. It is a mirrored dance. It is super literal. And of course, fucking Ex Machina, most famous scene, maybe. Like
incredible scene.
This is sort of what I was trying to get at earlier with Garland, and like one of the reasons I find him so appealing is like he's got a gooey center, and it's not even that far beneath the surface. Like I think he's a sentimental guy. He just has a very sort of stoic veneer. And we get it. Like that's why the scenes like "Call on Me," the the disco moment in Ex Machina, the Annihilation mirror alien dance. Like he's an artist, and like that is him. I think really just getting to, of course, not only be expressive, but like have like a really, especially knowing his just the fact that he identifies so strongly as a writer, getting to see him express himself in images alone, I find particularly fascinating just because he is so literary.
You know, now that you mentioned the dancing that's done in the Call on Me part, I was thinking about that again, and it did remind me that I think part of what's going on there is the kind of emphasis of just how young these guys are.
Yes, they're little babies.
And you know, and this I thought was really interesting because apparently a lot of the guys were in their 20s and they're being played by actors in their 20s. So you know, young 20s. And so these guys are children. And in my mind, the Navy SEAL, the special ops guy is older. He's like in his 30s and he's like grizzled and stuff. And it's
grizzled 30s.
Well, you know, I mean, they're you know, or maybe he's grizzled 40s. But you know, there's a life 30s. Cycle to this. They don't last that long unless they're McChrystal. I guess that guy was a maniac. But like, there's an emphasis on just like them being young and being sort of silly. And
True.
you know, and you know, they're dancing to this silly music video, which is obviously like ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's mostly women in the music video, half naked, and then the hard cut to the guys all surrounding the television, and it's all dudes, and they're all with their guns and stuff. Is I think a kind of really, it's just like a really fun image to just have that contrast. And it just hammers home like how, you know, how young and inexperienced in some ways, and part of inexperience comes with a kind of naivete and a kind of innocence. Like these guys are innocent, and they're about to go and have that innocence be shattered. And in the case of Elliot, like he never fully recovered, you know, from his injuries. He can't speak now. I think that's like. It's really cool. You know, it's really cool to show them as just like college students effectively, because that's how old they would be, right? Just a little bit older than college students. And they're just like at a frat party dancing, you know, and they're about to like be, as you put it, Jim, subjected to a torture that, you know, no human being should ever be subjected to. But this is, you know, where we're at. I think it's really interesting. Jim, do you have any final thoughts about the film?
The last thing I will offer, because I feel like I waffle back and forth, and some days I feel like I grasp it better, and other days I don't. But I just wanted to, as a final offering, ask you both, you know, Ray Mendoza, the co-writer, co-director who lived this experience, he says in virtually every interview, it seems to be a core feature of the marketing for this movie. He says, you know, I made this movie essentially so Elliot could remember, right?
Yeah.
And as I said before, you know, it's my belief that you know, and again, with no malice or judgment, I think this is more of a Ray thing. Like he says himself that he sort of broke down during one particular scene that they were filming. But this idea that Elliot needs to remember this horrible thing. On one hand, yeah, like our memories are such a vital part of us. So even terrible things, they're important, obviously. We know that. But what is Elliot gaining from seeing this recreated in perfect detail? Like, again, I go back and forth like about what's the point? Like why that? Why this movie? Why this way? It's always that question of why. And I think there is altruism to it. There's something definitely benevolent. $20 million fucking dollars. I recreated this thing that you don't remember. I love you and I care about you. It's a huge act of artistic service, art therapy. But I don't would I if this happened to me, I don't know if I'd want my friend to show me in perfect detail this terrible. So I don't know if did you guys think about that at all as a maybe a place to wrap things up?
I do have some thoughts about this because Elliot, in the interview that we saw
with Jocko,
said something I thought was really interesting. And he cannot walk, he cannot speak, and he had prepared written remarks, and the remarks said a lot of stuff about the pain and suffering he's gone through. So there's the moment which he has no memory of, but he certainly has a memory of the last 20 years, which have been filled, to hear him tell it, with immense amounts of suffering. And I suspect that it's a gesture of kindness in some regard for Ray to make a movie to show him this is what you did. This is, you did this for us. You were here with us. You made a sacrifice for us. And so you're suffering now. We remember it. This is what you did. We want to show you what you did for us. And that makes your suffering not in vain.
Right. Or just because you can't remember, it doesn't mean we have forgotten.
Well, it's also just, it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And you did these things and you were a hero, and this is why you're now in pain. And I could see that as a gesture of real friendship, because I would imagine, I think Elliot does feel quite a bit of frustration. I got that sense in the way he was writing about it. That he feels frustrated that this happened to him, that this happened in general, but that this happened in him, that he's wakes up every day in pain. And I think you might feel some of that frustration is mildly alleviated by at least knowing that there's a reason for that. It wasn't like you just woke up today and it's like, now you're in pain for the rest of your life. Fuck off, right? It's like, no. You did something heroic and that's why you're now in pain. And we do not forget that. Like it means something to us, what you did, the sacrifice that you made. And so I think that is a real gesture of friendship. And I definitely can see from Ray Mendoza's perspective why it was crucial, to tell the story. And it could have been told in many ways. And I'm sure they've told him what happened, but to really, this is a real big gesture. This is like
Massive.
a take your opportunity of Garland is like, hey, do you want to tell a story? And he's like, this is the one I want to tell.
Exaggerating, like it really feels like something out of Nathan Fielder's The Rehearsal in terms of how elaborate it is. And that's sort of like it's a glib thing to say, but like I also mean it. Like we just maybe think of it as less impressive because the final product is the film versus this insanely labyrinth-esque sort of behind the scenes experiment that, say, Fielder is doing. But I see Warfare as no less sort of impressive and no less conceptual, really, considering the fact that Garland and Mendoza were just like, this is all from memory. When things contradicted, we had a system, we would do this and blah, 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 blah. But again, it's just like the end product is the movie versus the end product being a documentary about Ray Mendoza and his friend Elliot and his new friend Alex Garland and how they used $20 million from A24 to make this crazy, docudrama almost, right? Yeah. So in that way, it again, it's just the layers to this movie are manifold, and it's I get the sense that this movie will age well. That's probably a dumb thing to say, but all I mean
put it out there, Jim. Put it out there.
I'm calling my shot with the
You're calling it now. Hey, look, we'll have you back in 10 years and you'll be like, it's aging pretty good, and we'll have you back in 20 years.
Then
and
there's going to
like,
be like a whole podcast just on warfare.
yeah, it'd be Jim Penola.
I know that'd be
I don't
tough.
think
That'd be
would.
a toughie.
You're going to manifest your shot. That's called manifesting your shot. Like, people can't stop talking about warfare. I don't know why.
Hopefully this movie is super irrelevant in 10 years because we've solved it. We've
abolished all war. There's no war. There's
Only
no
the
conflict.
drones are fighting.
Jim, thank you so much for being here. Now tell the folks at home about An Invitation Productions and the new show you're doing, Lanterns.
Huge honor. I'm such a fan of Cows in the Field, so this is a big deal for me. But my entrance into podcasting was a show, a 15-episode limited series called An Invitation to the Invitation. I'm wearing a very nerdy, directed by Karin Kasama shirt right now.
Yes.
But the miniseries An Invitation to the Invitation, its whole structure is remarkably ambitious, but somehow I did it. Every episode starts with a recreation of a scene from the original script by Phil Hay and Matt Manfredi, and then the second half of the episode analyzes it in scripted fashion. So the film, The Invitation, is recreated from scratch as an audio drama, and then I do a scripted analysis for the given scene of the episode, and it's of course broken down into roughly 15 scenes. And then I did a bunch of bonus episodes with the filmmakers themselves, who I consider heroes of mine. So Karin Kasama herself, co-writers, co-producers, Phil Hay, Matt Manfredi, star, Logan Marshall Green, my pal, Logan Marshall Green, amazing artist, Mike Doyle, Lindsay Burge, really huge deal for me personally. And from there, a couple years later, I did a 10th anniversary retrospective to finally, hopefully, get the invitation out of my system so I could talk about other movies like Warfare, I guess. But Lanterns is a companion piece to An Invitation to the Invitation, more conversation based. And Justin and Laura were amazing guests, amongst others, including Cows in the Field regulars, Scout Tafoya, Blake Howard, Phil Gawthorne, all stars, people I really, really admire, present company very much included. And so now that the invitation is somewhat in the rear view, I'm looking forward to putting some emphasis on other movies.
That's great. That's great. Well, you know what I realized I realized this about 5 minutes into our conversation. I just want to mention it here. Warfare, The Invitation, both movies about people trapped in a room trying to get out. I don't know.
It's true. It's true. Well, listen, because you mentioned that and I actually do mean this sincerely. One of my access points into Warfare was one of the last lines in Kasama's Girl Fight. And that comes from Michelle Rodriguez herself. She says, "Maybe life is just war, period." And I think that really summarizes a lot of Kasama's filmography. And I think it unfortunately represents the evergreen quality to the movie we just discussed. But there's a lot of richness to this film. It's not necessarily pleasant, but it's worth experiencing.
It's worth experiencing. Check it out, folks. And go check out The Invitation or An Invitation Productions. You can listen to it anywhere, right, Jim? And you are you're Jim Penola on
everywhere.
All the social media?
Blue Sky, Twitter, as I think I mentioned earlier. I'm most often haunting the cursed grounds of Instagram, which is definitely decaying my mental health. But Letterboxd is fun, and so there you
find
go.
Letterboxd. Find Jim on Letterboxd. Are you just at Jim Penola on Letterboxd?
At Jim Penola everywhere.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, I do follow you on Letterboxd. I just can't remember what your title is. Jim, thanks so much for being here again. And we are at Cowspod on Twitter. You can find us on the web and Blue Sky, and you can find us on the web at cowspod.com. Buy a shirt at shop.cowspod.com or a tote or a hat. In 2 weeks, we'll be talking to Andrew Overby and Hannah Bleckman of Authorized Novelizations podcast about Flatliners, the Joel Schumacher Flatliners. And we should watch both. Let's watch both Flatliners.
Deal.
Yeah. Yeah. So see you guys then. Bye.
Bye.